Hello and welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming to this month's Poem Jam, celebrating Mary TallMountain. I'm John Smalley and a librarian here at the main library in the Humanities Department. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to acknowledge our community. On behalf of the public library, we wish to welcome you to the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the indigenous stewards of this land, and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as caretakers of this place. As guests, we who reside in their traditional territory recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. We wish to pay our respects by acknowledging the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community and by affirming their sovereign rights. For those of you who are here for the first time, I want to just mention that the Poem Jam poetry reading series takes place on the second Thursday of each month, and it is facilitated by poet Kim Shuck. You can learn more about upcoming programs by grabbing a flyer or newsletter from the table on your right. And while you're there, there's also coffee and cookies and a special, very limited edition of pin celebrating Mary TallMountain. So make sure you pick one of those up before you leave today. There are also some books for sale in the front on your right. So one last place you can find out about our events is, of course, our events calendar on sfpl.org. So now that's all the announcements I have. Without further ado, I wish to turn the microphone over to San Francisco's 7th Poet Laureate, Kim Shuck. Please give a warm welcome to Kim.
Hey folks, thank you for joining us here. There's more stuff on here than I'm used to, so it's unexpected props. So tonight we're here to celebrate the fact that we've reinstituted the Mary TallMountain Award. And I don't know how long it's been since we've done one, but I'm really excited about the 3 people who are getting it tonight. And Mary TallMountain was an essential character in my evolution as a poet, as an urban indigenous woman. In the late 60s and early 70s, as I was growing up, we were getting a lot of news from the Red Power movement, who are legitimately trying to encourage people to kind of, at the time it was important to be pan-Indian, to be collective rather than individual, which made a lot of sense. But what I loved about Mary, a lot of things I loved about Mary. One of the things I loved about Mary was that she was one of 2 indigenous urban people who were saying things like, nobody should really try to be living 200 years ago. There are a lot of ways to fail at being your identity, and it's fine. That we needed to give ourselves some space, admit that our lives were not the same, that part of that had nothing to do with choices that we made individually, and to just sort of be in the place we were at and practice a philosophy that supported our traditions, and then very much encouraged folks to be of their specific people rather than being sort of collective. And the other person who was doing a lot of that was Carolee Sanchez, who is my poetry mom. So I just cannot say enough about the anxiety I was spared because of the work of this woman and others. And I'm going to tap dance for a minute and let Jess get a full deep breath before I call them up onto the microphone. So you just let me know when that's fun. So the best part about this particular series for me is to be able to amplify voices that might not otherwise get heard. And then the work ends up in the collection of the San Francisco Public Library, which is pretty cool. And we've been doing this 6 years now. Yeah, we've been doing it about 6 years now. And so once a month, we put together a show that has to do with, voices that need to be amplified, which is pretty spectacular. And it's an enormous pleasure to be doing this and to be celebrating this. Now I'm going to call Jess up. Please welcome Jess to the microphone.
All the way from Oakland, California, and the Bay Bridge, which is always full of cars. And apparently there's a special event, which means parking is extremely expensive. What is the special event, do you know?
Fleet Week.
Fleet Week. Oh, I heard one of those this morning. I know Mary would have hated Fleet Week, just like most of us do. So Mary and I go back a bit. I met her in the 80s, the Tenderloin, and she was a poet who was writing, reading in the neighborhood, showed up at all the workshops. I had a job at the Tenderloin Reflection Education Center, and my job was to set up workshops and reach out to the community and do a liberation theology in a crazy 1980s style experiment up from South America. So I met Mary and we just clicked right away. Am I close enough? Oops. Oh, we clicked right away. So I said, wow, she had all these little chapbooks at the time. And she had, hopefully, a big collection that was going to come out at UCLA eventually, but it was taking a long time. So I said, I have a printing press. Let's print some of your poems. And so she put this collection had gone out of print, and she couldn't get it back into print. So we reprinted it, and she had a good time doing it. This is an autographed copy. I'll give it to Mary Jean, just for old time's sake. And so then she wrote, and she became a writing workshop facilitator at a certain point. When we had a little women's writing group, she took her turn at the wheel. Eventually, her health got into some challenging places, and she started talking about her legacy. And she started occasionally thinking she was going to die. And then she started going into the hospital, and pretty much close to dying. And then she would come out and she'd say, I went to the other side. And that's where she would get a lot of her poems, like The Wolf. She did 3 wolf poems. One of them is called The Last Wolf, and it's set in a hospital room. And it's apocalyptic. San Francisco falling down. And the last living wolf is coming through the abandoned city. So she had this vision of the other side. She'd bring stuff back. Then she'd say, I'm going to die. We have to do something to keep these writing circles together and celebrate Native culture in the city, connect the community, lift up people's voices. So then she got in a taxi cab accident. She was the passenger. She got $10,000, but she was on disability. So she couldn't put the money in the bank or she'd lose the benefits. So she said, hey, I got $10,000. Why don't you and Beth put this money in the bank for me, and we'll call it the TallMountain Circle. And we'll dedicate it to preserving Native American writers and community-based writers and people doing the right thing. And so Beth and I opened up a joint account, stashed the money to keep it away from the gov. And then we said, okay, I'm going to die soon. And then she didn't. Then she said, I'm going to die soon. And then one time she says, I'm definitely dying. So we had a big meeting. We got about 10 or 12 people to our little library at the Tenderloin Reflection Center. And we made it official. This is now the TallMountain Circle. Then she moved up to Petaluma. She lived for another couple of years. And then when she was in Petaluma, I used to drive up and see her. And I noticed all these animal poems that she had done. And so I said, you should do a book of just your animal poems. So we did this one. Unfortunately, she died in 1994, September 2nd, just 30 years ago in a month. Luckily, the day after my birthday, I was so generous of her. And Kitty and Beth were there to see her over to the other side. And then, maybe a lot of that money had got spent up in the final medical bills for Mary. But lo and behold, what's her name? Nancy Nordoff from the Hedgebrook Foundation. People said, and Mary had gone up to Hedgebrook for a retreat. She said, well, we got to put money back into that. So by then, since Mary was dead, we opened it as a nonprofit account and went legit. And so it is. We started giving out awards after that in honor of Mary's memory. Kind of went into abeyance during the pandemic. It's gone on and off over the decades, but 30 years, there's a little revival happening. Mary Jean's still pulling the weight, and the community's still here, sort of, and we're all just keeping on. So thanks for everyone to come out and honor the memory of our dear friend, wonderful poet, Mary TallMountain.
Oh, I'm Kitty Costello, and I had a bunch of wonderful notes all written up to say what I needed to say, and I showed up at the door and went, so I'm winging this. But Mary, we all got together at one point on Valentine's Day and told her, we're having a reading at the 509 Cultural Center, if anybody remembers that in the old days in the Tenderloin. And we were giving her an award for what she had been doing in the community and how she had helped other people, always like wanting to hear the voices and foster people's ability to speak speak their experience. So for her literary excellence and for doing that in community. And so that was the first award, was that we gave her the TallMountain Award. And then as Jess was saying, she wanted that to continue for inner city folks, for Native American community. So there's a lot that's happened here in the Tenderloin. Mary lived for about 30 years in the Tenderloin. And Kim was describing some of what the impact it would have on urban indigenous people feeling cut off from their roots. And Mary was this kind of amazing example. She was adopted out at a young age, was moved out of her native village of Nulato along the Yukon River in Alaska when she was 6, and never went back for 50 years. And a lot of her writing pursuit was about reclaiming that and actually writing things that no one was documenting hardly. There was no poet and no novelist, no memoirist or whatever much documenting that community. And so she was doing her own journey, but she was also creating something that the longer it goes on, the more I realize, wow, this means the world to people up in Alaska. When the pandemic was sort of petering out, and I was thinking about the TallMountain Awards again, and Kim had joined the crew here, I started to poke around on the web and see what's going on up in Alaska nowadays, what's going on in her native village. And I found Anne Hanley, who is a writer laureate emerita of Alaska. And she had put together a play that toured all over at universities and cultural centers, but also in the villages along the Yukon. She'd been asked to write a story, the story of the life of Sidney Huntington, who was a contemporary of Mary's, but he lived a lot longer. Mary died in her early 70s, and Sidney Huntington lived into his 90s. And in the process of talking to him about creating this story, what it turned into was all the losses that had happened from the suicides that had happened in his family, especially from his children committing suicide. And so there's been a huge epidemic of that up along, in these remote villages. So she created this play, and it toured to all these places, including going into the villages, and people in the villages would be part of performing this play. So just bringing awareness and bringing a sense of, wow, if we talk about this, you can talk about this. So I saw that and I went, oh my God, we need to give Anne Hanley the TallMountain Award. This is awesome. And in the meantime, just being connected with her, she kept asking me, I sent her, whatever I had. And she was just putting together this whole picture out of Mary's writing of Mary's life, and put together a play that's called Coming Home, that's now been performed, like, I think 4 times, including at the Native Elders Conference in Galena, Alaska. It's a conference that happens annually. A lot of what it's the group Danakanaga, the Voice of the Elders. The intention of the gathering is, like, a lot of people were at boarding schools when they should have been learning the Native stuff when they were growing up, and so the people who stayed in the culture and knew the stuff that are elders, like teaching the other elders, all the crafts and the lore and those kinds of things. And now they've also invited in a lot of youth to help seed that for the future. So, I'm amazed, like, getting back in touch. It's changed dramatically since 30 years ago about how much the Native culture is now, like, a vibrant part of the university, the films. There's just an amazing bunch of people up there doing things that just wasn't possible before. So Anne put together this play that's Mary's poems and her memoir. She laced them together to make a story of Mary's life. And I'm going to play a little excerpt that KUAC, the public radio up there, put together, like interviews, and then recorded some of the people reading her poems and reading the parts that Anne wrote for people to help lace it together and tell Mary's story. So this is like 10 minutes of from this. Some of the people you're going to hear are Princess Desiree Johnson, who is an award-winning filmmaker, and she is the force producer, writer behind, if anybody's seen Molly of Denali, that's a kid's show on PBS. It's like she has everything to do with that. This is where I don't have my notes, so I'm going to try to do it justice. Frank Yaska, who runs the Cultural Center connected with the Tanana chiefs, that's all the chiefs from all those tribes along the Yukon. There's a cultural center in Fairbanks, and he runs that and a lot of the cultural activities that go on. But, like, everyone that was involved in this thing, when they're asked, like, how did you get involved? It's like, well, Frank asked me, like, as soon as he knew about it. He just gathered everybody, and he's an actor and a director and has, a ton of experience like that. And then there's Kathleen Meckel, who does the voice of Mary. Other people read her poems, but there's the voice of Mary, and Kathleen Meckel is a lifelong educator and an incredible bead artist, I just found out. And so she's, in education and Alaskan culture, like, she's taught at university for years and is just now retiring. So she does the voice of Mary. And then the other reader is TallMountain, who Kathleen Meckel was born and raised in Nulato, where Mary was from. And TallMountain is also born and raised in Nulato, where Mary's from, and is on the council of the people who help run everything up there. So, and he actually had been among the people who, like, Mary went up and taught at villages, and at universities and other places in the latter part of her life. And so he'd met her when he was, like, 10 or 11 years old. So all of these people had memories of what Mary meant to them. And when Anne Hanley brought this stuff to them, everybody said, yes, Mary TallMountain. So it's been this amazing thing of learning more about what she has meant up there and then bringing it back. So all of those reasons are why we're giving Anne Hanley the award. And I had a wonderful little statement from her that I lost everything on the way in here. So I wish I could read that. I'm really sorry that that's missing, but she was just wishing us all well as we celebrate Mary and talking about the next show that's been happening of Coming Home. So I will just play this excerpt.
I'm so glad that you are involved in this project too. And Coming Home, the story and poetry of Alaskan poet Mary.
This is
TallMountain.
Princess Desiree
How
Thompson
did you get
now
involved with
coming
this? We've all know that it probably has Frank involved.
Yeah. Well, there's a saying, our existence is resistance. And I think being born an Indigenous person is very political in its nature, given the history of colonization and the very intentional policies of the US government to separate us from our homelands. And Mary TallMountain was able in her poetry to exemplify the very real stories of what it means to be taken from your home.
Yeah.
And to have all these experiences and take in the world that was very foreign to her, and somehow make peace. And I think that is something we're all trying to do, is make peace with the world around us. So I think that, to me, I resonate with her anger, with her frustration of not being understood, with trying to explain how critical it is that we acknowledge and act on our relationship with our Mother Earth. So I just am really grateful and honored that I was asked to be a part of this, and I've been a fan of her work for some time.
Absolutely. And anger is something that comes out in her story. And does that have a sense of healing to it too, or at least an acknowledgement that there is a sense of anger that, being taken, or that the earth is,
Yeah, I mean, I think
in
that
healing.
Yeah, I think that, it's necessary. It's all a part of the human experience. These feelings of rage and anger and grief, like, you have to be able to express and acknowledge. And I be a friend to your feelings and just be like, okay, I'm feeling, all these things, but what do I do with these feelings? And Mary TallMountain put it into her poetry, which in many ways is able to emotively convey and relay, so that the audience can feel a little bit of what it feels like.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. Thank you for being a part of this.
Yeah, merci.
And I am so excited to hear that last excerpt from the Coming Home.
Thank you. Masicho.
Masicho. And the last excerpt from Frank Yaska is back for narration, and we've got Kathleen Fickle.
Eventually, you recovered.
Had to. There was too much going on in my life. I couldn't slow down for cancer. Shyly, tentatively, I'd begun in the early 60s to make small but real poems. In the mid-60s, the Friars Press began printing them. Soon I found myself giving readings. All kinds of people came. I was sober, cancer-free, and so grateful.
And then you went back to Alaska.
A poet friend of mine told writers in Alaska that he had discovered an Alaska Native writer in San Francisco. Next thing, I knew Alaskans contacted me, grants in hand. I was to be a writer in the schools, all expenses paid, and I got paid on top of that. I would have paid them for the privilege. The bush plane hovered, careened, tilted, sideways and down, rattling fiercely. Dizzy, I looked across the pilot's hands and saw Nulado, its roofs couch shining in a long bend of the river. When the two-seater growled and bounced past the whitewashed crosses of Graveyard Hill, everything dimmed before my eyes, my quick tears.
Once Mary landed, she could see right away things had changed in the 50 years she had been away. But the women were still trying to keep the old customs.
the women in old parkas. Snapping gunshot cold, blue stubborn lips clapped shut. The women in old parkas loosened snares intent and slow. They handle muskrat Yukon way, appeased his spirit Yiga. Bare purple hands stiffen, must set lines again. Night drops quick black in winter house, round shadows, cook fresh meat soup, steam floats, skinny bellies grumble. They pick up skin work, squint, turn lamp wick down, kerosene almost gone, so anyway. Oh, this winter is the worst, everything running out, not much furs, they make soft woman hum. But hey, how about those new parkas we hung up for stick dance? How the people sing, how crazy shadows dip and stomp on dance house walls. The remembering arms rise like bird wings. At morning they look into the sky, laugh at little lines of rain, finger their old parkas, think spring is coming soon.
I met a whole slew of my cousins from Auntie's family. So many fiddle dances, so much food. I was having the time of my life.
Can I read the next poem? I've been practicing. Good Grease. The hunters went out with guns at dawn. We had no meat in the village, no food for the tribe and the dogs, no caribou in the caches. All day we waited. At last, as darkness hung at the river, we children saw them far away. Yes, they were carrying caribou. We jumped and shouted. By the fires that night, we feasted. The old one clucked, sucking and smacking, sopping the juices with sourdough bread. The grease would warm us when hungry winter howled. Grease was beautiful, oozing, dripping, and running down our chins. We talk of it when we see each other far from home. Remember the marrow sweet in the bones? We grabbed for them like candy. Good grease. Mary documented every nuance of the river, the weather and the people in her diary. But she came to Nolata to do more than observe. Mary came to find her mother's grave.
Tassie Saunders made a picnic for me and Auntie at Graveyard Hill. We forged our way around and around through the scratching brush, reading the names carved on the white crosses, visiting people long ago. The old graves were peaceful in the hot sun. I felt the loving, kind presences of all around me. We ate Spam and graham crackers high above the river beside the Demoski grave houses. Then we went back to searching. We looked all day until the mosquitoes got the best of us. But we didn't find Mary Jo's grave, or Billy's either. Let's go, I finally said.
There is no word for goodbye. Sequoia, I said, looking through the net of wrinkles into wise black pools of her eyes. What do you say in Athabascan when you leave each other? What is the word for goodbye? A shade of feeling rippled the wind-tanned skin. Ah, nothing, she said, watching the river flash. She looked at me close. We just say, pya, that means, see you. We never leave each other. When does your mouth say goodbye to your heart? She touched me light as a bluebell. You forget when you leave us? You're so small then. We don't use that word. We always think you're coming back, but if you don't, we'll see you someplace else. You understand? There is no word for goodbye.
So I'm doing MJ now. Okay, so in a lot of our stories, there are characters who just regular people. And then something dramatic happens to them and makes them a legend that we carry forward. The last time I saw Mary was at the San Francisco State Powwow. And if I'm not mistaken, the order of seating at that moment was Mary Jean Robertson, myself, Dwayne Big Eagle, and Mary TallMountain. And I was carrying my infant who was born in 1990. So it had to have been spring of 91. And he was still a babe in arms. And I just nursed him. And since Dwayne is not here and sort of told us that at the last minute, I feel completely comfortable sharing this little moment where Dwayne was bouncing Ed. How many of you have had infants around? I had just fed him. Yeah. So Dwayne is bouncing Ed. Bouncing Ed. Exactly what you're thinking happened. And Mary, both of us were kind of trying to get him to, it's like, I just fed him. And then a couple seconds later, Mary said, she just fed him. And then, he got irped on, which I think, is a lesson, right? Anyway, Mary took him from Dwayne, and Ed pressed his hand against the side of her head, and they sat there with one another in total silence for a long time. And that was the last time I saw her. My eldest is a pretty remarkable being, and Mary was a remarkable being. Bill Moyers said of Mary TallMountain that she was the most important poet of the 20th century. That's not qualified by female or native or anything. A lot of the ways in which we have not been visible comes from this. Until 1978, our religions were illegal. So a lot of us were raised hiding a big part of ourselves. How many people in the room, by applause, have had to live at some degree in closet? As closeted people, right? That's thousands of cultures across the country living like that. And we're only really just unfolding in some ways, because it takes a minute after the pressure releases for you to believe that it's possible. So I was fully an adult by the time that happened. And Mary was more than just fully an adult by the time that happened. This is what we've been taught. And I still have a hard time talking about some cultural things because, it was illegal. One of the cultural organs in San Francisco that's maintained a space for a voice of Indigenous people is Voices of the Native Nations. Mary Jean Robertson and Tavia ran Voices of the Native Nations, and now MJ does it on KPOO radio. It's over 50 years now. Is that right? For more than 50 years now, Ms. J's been holding down the space of our truths publicly in an environment that wasn't always welcoming for that. Now, full disclosure, I did not vote on whether Mary Jean was going to get this. I've known her since I was 7 years old. It is emphatically a conflict of interest. So I sat there grinning while they voted for you because, Mary Jean's been working on a book called Radioactive Indians, how Native people use radio and the history of natives in radio. And it's an incredibly important piece of writing. And so Mary Jean Robertson is our second recipient for the Mary TallMountain Award today, based on that work. And also all of the activism in that you can't bring up a political indigenous thing that has happened in San Francisco over the last 50 years that this woman hasn't had something to do with. And you can barely bring up a neighborhood, in any kind of neighborhood thing, the cultural centers, the neighborhood arts projects, things that are not necessarily indigenous but affect all of us. So that is for why Ms. J is also a recipient of this award. Do you want to say something, my love? Well, I'm going to say there are a lot of people who've heard enough of my voice already, so maybe come on up.
50 years of talking 2 or 3 hours every week.
That's why you can easily do 5 or 10 minutes.
Right.
Do it on the mic so we have fun.
Exactly. Okay. All right. So I think Mary TallMountain is either spinning in her grave or dancing on the streets of heaven. Because, you know, we had something special. Tavy and I went everywhere. We recorded her. We went to Glide Church and volunteered with her. We went to the Tenderloin Reflectory Center. And thank you, Jesse, for the autographed copy of that book. I'm really looking forward to it. I have a copy, but it wasn't signed, so I'm really excited. I have a tradition in my family, and it happened when I was 7 years old. I was sitting on my great-grandmother's bed and reading her a story. And she put her arm around me and she said, you know, all my life I wanted to live to be 100. And your name is Mary, and my name is Mary. And I'm 93 years old, and you're 7 years old. So together, we've made it. So when I moved to San Francisco, and I stopped working for the phone company, which everybody has to do when they first get to San Francisco, they have to work for the phone company. When I stopped working for the phone company, I started working for the Native American Indian Senior Center. You have to have all of that, Native American Indian Senior Center, because it includes all of them. And I met a lovely Seminole woman. Her name was Sayakwe Cheney. And she was 70 years old, and I was 30. And she was born on June 18th, and I was born on June 18th. So together we made 100. I think you're getting a little clue about where this is going. On June 17th, when I turned 35, well, I wasn't 35 yet. Mary TallMountain had her birthday, her 65th birthday. She was 65. I was 35. Her name was Mary. My name was Mary. I was born June 18th. She was born June 17th. So I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a day, after my birthday. So together we made 100. And American Indians always do things in fours. So Helen O'Rourke and I share a birthday of June 18th, 1948. So she was 50 and I was 50, and together we made 100. I think that there's always a tradition of coming together, of community, of inspiring different communities to come together, especially in San Francisco. There's something about San Francisco that I think you can't find anywhere else in the world. Here, we demanded that when most
civic philanthropy goes to the ballet, the symphony, the opera. And San Francisco for many, many years did that, because we wanted to be a very highly cultural city. We demanded the neighborhood arts program to be founded so that every culture could be represented in the city. And I was lucky enough to be the secretary for the neighborhood arts program before the cultural centers were founded. I worked with Burial Clay. I worked with Bingo, Bernice Bing. I worked with Russell Robles and Al Robles. I worked with, Alejandro Murguia and Roberto Vargas. And I worked with the American Indian Arts Workshop. This was a period of time when we had the CETA program. And for the first time in the memory of the relocated Indians, American Indians in the arts workshop got a living wage. Alberta Snyder and Bill Snyder, Ed and Madeline Pyatt. I think the Catricionos were around there somewhere, but I'm not sure. We had CETA program that paid a living wage. Now, unfortunately, I got a CAC grant instead of a CETA grant because the CAC grant took the taxes out and they didn't take the taxes out of my grant. So I thought I was getting more money than the people that were, so I felt a little bit guilty. And then I ended up at the end of the year owing taxes. Oh my goodness, this has never happened to me before. It's happened several times since. I must say that I love the work that we were able to produce. And another thing that I've been able to do was do something that we decided to call the Ohlone Profiles Project, which is to uplift the original people on this land. And what we were able to do was we found a dance singing group, from down in LA, and we brought them up to the city where they said they were originally from. They had descendants from the Mission Dolores. And those folks were brought here for the first time, and they participated in another festival that San Francisco is unique in producing, and that's the World Arts West Dance Festival, where cultures from all over the world have people that have moved to the city and have instructors who instruct their children in their traditional dances. I don't think anybody else does that. And we also did the World Music Festival, where, they uplifted Ohlone voices for the first time. So I feel very, very proud and very, very honored to have been doing this work for as long as I have. Oh yeah, and I do a little radio show. So if you haven't yet got my card, this has all the information on when the radio show is. And if you have any announcements that you want to do, I still do it every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. So thank you very much.
Okay, Leah, can you come up and say a couple of things about Jesse? Please welcome Leah to the mic.
Once we realized that we were giving Mary Jean the TallMountain Award and Ann Hanley the TallMountain Award, it's like, boy, the inner city, the Tenderloin, something needs to happen with that. And then Jesse James Johnson, who I crossed paths with mostly at Faithful Fools. If you don't know what Faithful Fools is, go Google it and find out about a fabulous organization in the Tenderloin. and the more I learned about Jesse and what he had been doing, it just was totally along the lines of what Mary was doing in the Tenderloin, to be facilitating groups for every kind of marginalized people you can imagine. And he had just come out with this fabulous new book, or it was on its way. And those of us at Freedom Voices were asked to do a little consulting on it. So I got a preview of it and was just so blown away by the quality of the writing and how hard-hitting it is for all the things that we all need to hear about what goes on in people's lives that don't necessarily get the microphone very often. So, he's gotten tons of awards working with Hospitality House and being on the board of that for years, and a whole host of things for helping political organizing in the Tenderloin. Just put out a film, helped do a film with Zachary. What's his name? Sexton. Zachary Sexton. That's this is where I had notes. A Different Sky, I think it is. Discovering a Different Sky. That's all these interviews in the Tenderloin that just shows you all these people, how they ended up there and how they have uplifted themselves being in the Tenderloin. That's just so beautiful. So and Leah was at Jesse's book launch and had a bunch of other wonderful things to say about him. So I just wanted to invite her to add on.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Leah Laksamana. I'm a faithful fool. If you don't know us, we're on the Purple Building at 234 Hyde Street. As a fool, my history with Jesse goes back 4 years, but I actually met him 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, at a community organizing meeting at Hospitality House. And this is not in my bingo card, being able to present him and his work, but it's been a great experience and be able to be part of this journey. I just want to share, for those who don't know Jesse beyond being an activist, an artist, and a dear friend, some of you may know that he lost his ability to speak a couple of years ago. But thanks to a friend, Alan Ellison, Alan was able to use AI to reconstruct so Jesse's voice to be able to do readings. I think we'll hear part of that. But in this book launch a couple of weeks ago, it was an honor for some of us to be able to read that and hear Jesse's voice. And the documentary that Kitty alluded to a couple of years ago, Jesse was one of the awardees of the California Creative Core Initiative Award, which funded local artists collaborating with organizations to be able to produce a work with filmmaker and young artist and activist Zachary Sexton at the back. They were able to create this documentary, which was a love letter to the Tenderloin in essence, highlighting the stories of real residents and the local voices. So when we have future screenings, we'll be happy to share that, but stay tuned. I just want to share part of Jesse's poetry was actually incorporated in that documentary. So when Jesse was asked I just want to share his motivation for that documentary and some of his poems. He said, "I write in defense of this neighborhood, Tenderloin. I do so with urgency, for this is my home and it is under assault. I struggle to love this place unconditionally. This means giving up notions of good or bad. This means remembering that all humans have value." We will be able to read some of his poems shortly, but if you're inspired by his words, there are some books for sale. Thank you.
I appreciate being here tonight. My fellow awardees are remarkable women whose contributions to our liberation are nothing short of extraordinary. I am humbled to be among them. Thank you, Kitty, Kim, and all the other comrades who made tonight possible. Thank you, Carmen, Sam, Jimena, Selena, Linda, Zach, and all the other fools for getting me here. There are some who speak for the poor and marginalized. There are more that speak about us. And there are way too many who just speak at us. Rarely are the poor and the marginalized allowed to speak for ourselves. I believe, like I think Mary TallMountain believed, that the voices of the marginalized are essential to our liberation. That is the power of tonight's event. It allows people like myself to contribute to the collective discourse. Since I lost my ability to speak, I've been trying to figure out how best to participate in this discourse. I sometimes get by with utterances and grunts. More often, it's by scribbling on index cards and notebooks. Lately, I've been trying out this voice app that my friend Alan Ellison developed. One of the lessons of this loss might be a lesson I come across again and again, that there are truly no individual solutions, that the most elegant resolve of any problem requires a collective effort. I'm testing that notion tonight by asking a trio of friends to share my works with you tonight. I wish I had more time to speak of these three tonight. For now, let me just introduce with gratitude and brimming affection, Loris Ojeda, Leah Laxamana, and Joel Yates. I leave you to them. Thank you.
This is the title poem of Jesse's new book. Mine is a community of misfits and outlaws. Tonight read in 3 parts. Mine is a community of misfits and outlaws. I came to this place almost 25 years ago. My eyes ablaze with crystal meth, a single pair of boots, and about 72 T cells. This was back when an AIDS diagnosis meant a quick slide through poverty into a grave. All I wanted was a room with a door I could lock against the voices of my dead friends. Here we live, the small broken promises of shattered picture frames, whiskey bottles, mirror shards, cracked ribs, splintered doors, chipped teeth, tattered cosmologies, and zoning laws. The hubris and debris of who we might have been had we not from the highest windows jumped, escaping destinies we cannot abide. I have seen the poor chew the bones of those they loved best. I have seen the sick stagger about disrobed in the parking lots of hospitals begging to be embraced. I have seen the crippled lying in hotel rooms, staring into space, and all I could do was turn away.
The Tenderloin is a place where the broken, the deranged, and the diseased are warehoused, then left there until their expiration date. Thankfully, the people have their own notions about how their lives should be. They live their lives with defiance, courage, and with the freedom of a people who were never meant to survive. It is in the despair, in the capitalist waste, in the ruins of other times, and the fragments of our former lives. It is in the rot that is the Tenderloin, that we find fecund soil for our return to the world. Healing, justice, love, redemption do not come easy to men. They require effort, commitment, sweat, and humility. They require a second chance, or a third, or more. No one of us can create the chance we need alone. We require the help of others, and we must help them in turn, each giving what they can and only taking what they need. That is the lesson and gift of solidarity among the outcast and the poor.
See that woman arguing with her hair? See her sister feeding pigeons? Is it prayers they mutter or obscenities? To me, it doesn't matter. See that panhandler with a homemade sign? See that young skateboarder sick for heroin? It is among these, the addicted, the ill, the criminal, the old, the rejected, those who bear the brunt of poverty, those who suffer most the contempt and violence that America rains down upon the poor, that I have found shelter, sanctuary, respect, even affection. Mine is a community of misfits and outlaws, people who defy convention, people who transgress borders, people who push against society's boundaries, and in doing so, expand the possibilities of what the rest of us might be.
Of this poem, Jesse says, I was once assigned to write a Valentine's poem. I just couldn't do it. I'm not a heart and laces kind of guy. Then one night, this poem came to me in a single sitting. This, I think, would be my Valentine's poem. Monstrous Love. 3 a.m. I find comfort in the measured breathing of my companion sleeping in the queer blue light of a blank video monitor on the living room wall. 2, like reclining twin Buddhas on my roommate's new sofa, one sprawled out in an easy chair, another wrapped in a rug on the floor. They are a landscape of cedar and caverns. They smell of tar and an old hunting jacket. They taste of electricity and salt. Ours is a monstrous love, fueled by the fat hunger of faggots and the pornographic images that flicker on the hot tube. Evoked by the unnameable power that summoned out of turbulent, defiled, radioactive waters, Godzilla, to rage, breathe fire, and avenge the long years of his solitude. Yes, he is vile, perverse, an abomination, yet I find comfort in his misshapen head, clawed, ugly feet, and bloodshot eyes, as I have found comfort in this cluster of men, for they are as serpents amid the figs and leaves. They are knights of sand. They are a watchtower. They are a thunder of gargoyles. We are a hideous bride.
La Luna, the stars. The stars are a bunch of shiny-faced punks, mean as a pack of coke-addicted Siamese cats. But even though the odds are like 1,000,000 against her, they won't mess with La Luna. The stars, while not as bright as they might look like, are still not dumb. They know La Luna, just a middle-aged ruca from the east side, unmarried, a lifelong soltera. She has no family to speak of, except for her hermano, El Sol, an ex-military type who lives on the better side of town. Still, they sense La Luna has no fear of them. They don't know why. This confuses them. So, they make themselves scarce when she comes around. They'd rather spend their time on easier prey, like maybe a white dwarf or one of those comets with a fancy tail. What the stars don't know is that La Luna's glow of confidence, her swag, her fearless stance, the way she breaks out her signature moves as she dances across the Milky Way, is all because La Luna secrets a loaded pistol in the inner pocket of her jacket. She knows there are treacherous currents in the depths of the sky. Every night she sees chained Andromeda, Medusa beheaded, Koyushauki hacked into 100 pieces among the constellations that move in a solemn procession against the dome of heavens. She's determined that this will not be her fate. And so she's packing heat. It's her talisman against fear, her skeleton key to the cosmos. A gun in a man's pocket is a dangerous object. It spits death. A gun in a man's pocket can be more stupid than a hard prick. But a gun in a woman's hand is an amulet, with powers far beyond the force of the bullets that sleep in its womb. La Luna says the gun allows her to do her job without fear or harm. She can conduct her nightly rounds without having to worry about the nasty little stars or some lecherous drunk planet weaving through the sky, making suggestive comments as she passes by. It means she can wear a gown of lacework and platinum or one of stardust hot clouds of plasm without consequences. It means she can linger to enjoy cool ocean breezes and apply the scented oil of her choosing. La Luna says a gun lets her powers shine so she may comfort the homesick, console star-crossed lovers, inspire poets, artists, late-night disc jockeys, and whisper secrets to spellcasters and farmers. It lets her make the clouds shimmer, brighten landscapes, flood urban canyons, and fill dark alleys with light. So, we who must travel these paths at night need not always stumble through dangerous shadows. When she flies above our heads, trailing moonlight like gentle caresses, we pause, look up, and from beneath our dark hoods, give our thanks. For is the guide, she is a reflected light.
Land of light, fog, and mist. I have seen these streets in many lights, in the amethyst cast of an autumn dusk, and the whitest light of a cloudless dawn, in the red noon sky of a blotted sun. Yet there are mysteries this land still holds. I might forget I live on the ocean's edge because on this peninsula, there still be deities of the first tribes. They are the gods of fog and mist. Old lumbering beasts who roll across the dunes and pour over the hills, then gracefully fill in the valleys, flooding the pools and gulches and blanketing the rises. Moonlight adorns them. There are small explosions of rainbow if they are touched by the sun. They shift shapes when caressed by the lands. Here they are a bison, there a bear, sometimes serpents. They stalk the buried waterways wary as panthers. They slink through alleys like a pair of coyotes. They listen for prayers. They sniff at the foul air of this lonely century. They wonder of those who once revered them, those who recognize the sacredness of fog and mist, their love of this place and the role they play in sustaining life on this land. Then they turn away, vowing to return, one day to see their kin restored.
The Great Spirit. 1. The Great Spirit that is the sky spreads its wings to conjure a night ablaze with stars, fragrant with juniper and the promise of rain. Gentle wings guide our journey over curving black serpents and magenta sands, east to where my father will be buried at the edge of the southern plains. 2. We shall all, each through our own journey, arrive with bare feet and dusty hair to a field of stone and yellow flowers. There, we wander among the grave markers and broken angels mouthing the names of ancestors and dead lovers. The tragedies and miracles of life are exhausting. We grow heavy with nostalgia, lower our bodies to the stony ground, close our eyes and give ourselves to the cicadas singing in the broomweed and yarrow. We dream of purple thistles. Barking dogs wake those who must return. 3. Hiking up hills and along dried arroyos, I seek the counsel of crows. I laugh with coyotes. I burn copal and sage. When I cross a path that my father walked, I miss the comfort of his arms. His absence is a sack of stones. Mesquite trees tremble with splendor and thorns. Leaves swirl. I am now an elder of my tribe, and I must face the coming storm.
Amarita y Olivia. Amarita, their grandmother, argued fiercely with her guests about Tino's car accident, why she never married by the church. ¿Quién mató a la pera Wiggy y qué significaba un gallo negro en el portal? While these were dilemmas long resolved or mysteries settled drained of drama, hace años pasado, Amarita's guests were ghosts with faulty recollections, and she herself suffered a profound disconnection and believed too many memories only lead to confusion. So as the past itself was wide open, the historical narrative contested territory they most applied to themselves, to larger questions. What myths must be passed to the next generations, or the internal quirks of logic unique to each superstitious belief? These were issues which took skill to discern and meant years of quibbling. These were debates that drew upon the wisdom of saints and even sometimes the testimony of the serpent itself. Only two things did not provoke debate. On only two things was there uncontested agreement. The death of the child buried by Amarita, buried 3/4 of a century ago in a shoebox in her backyard, was not the fault of any one person, but was the will of a mysterious God. And the grandson, now called Olivia, has always been the way she is, a mystery to all, but certainly the creation of a perfect God.
Tonight's final poem, Joy in the Tenderloin. Thousands of voices, electric with joy, thundered across the rooftops in the Tenderloin. The streets were flooded with all our neighbors, addressing one another as sister or brother, dealing out rounds of congratulations, chuckling with pride, clucking with disbelief, trading jokes, speculating about a future. Some spoke of miracles. Some spoke of their sons. People were dancing, boomboxes jamming. Barbecue grills were fired up. Someone was handing out ginger-flavored Vietnamese candies, which we all politely took. There was a sweet smell of marijuana. Waves of laughter, tears and teasing, admonishments and much praising of the higher powers. More laughter still. Laughter out loud and from deep inside. Of course, there were sirens. Emergency lights flashing. Cops revving up their motorcycles, but they kept their distance until well after dark. The day Barack Hussein Obama was elected president of the United States. Thank you.
So if you'd like to read more of Jesse's poems, the books are over here. Please come check them out. We've also got some giveaway items of Mary TallMountain posters and chapbooks that you're welcome to take home with you. And then we need to call Jesse up and give him his award.
The award winner. Thank you for your great work. Jesse James Johnson. I'm Jesse. Jesse Poet. All of Jesse. I'm going to come over for the time. Enjoy it. Thank you.
Can we get another round of applause for the award winners? The people who loaned Jesse their voices tonight. This may actually be the most beautiful audience we've ever had in this room. Thank you so much. It's a tradition at Poem Jam to take a picture of all of the performers. I'd also like the board members to come up. We'll meet by the mural over there. Thank you for being here. Buy a book, pick up a flyer, have a cookie. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mike.